Good afternoon. This is Dyke Hendrickson. I am the host of Life Along the Merrimack, which is a weekly show where we talk about the river, its history, and sometimes we actually talk about the people here in the Merrimack Valley. Today we have two individuals from the Newburyport Literary Festival, and they're going to be our guests now to talk about the festival, which is coming up this weekend. And we have Skye Wentworth and Vicki Hendrickson, who are both leaders of the festival. Before I start, I just want to mention something, I guess you'd call it housekeeping. It relates to the show itself and where it can be seen and heard. Our shows are available to watch and to listen to on demand on our YouTube channel and our SoundCloud. To reach our YouTube channel, go to ncmhub.org and click the YouTube icon on the top of the right of the page. To reach our SoundCloud, go to ncmhub.org and click on the SoundCloud logo, which is the cloud icon on the top hand of the page, top right of the page. So those are elements that you can keep in mind if you want to see a repeat or just see it again. So one thing I want to say, Vicki, congratulations on bringing the festival off again. Can you talk about how the festival started in Newburyport and what got you and Skye interested in getting it going?
Well, actually, Skye was one of the first people that I got in touch with. I happened to be in Oxford, Mississippi, and I was talking with William Faulkner. No, I wasn't talking
William
with
Faulkner.
I wasn't talking with him. It was my mistake. It actually was my nephew. And so I am wandering around, and there's all this sort of detritus left from the festival, which had been the weekend before. And I thought, they had a literary festival? Well, their literary festival lasts a week, which ours does not, thank heaven. But I found out who was in charge, and it was Richard Holworth, who was also the mayor, but he owned Square Books, which is known throughout the country by authors who's had started this with the woman who ran the Cultural Center of the South.
How long has it been going?
This is a 14th year.
Skye, how did you get involved?
I got involved because Vicki was looking for someone to do publicity. Mm-hmm. And I'm a book publicist, so it was a perfect match.
Well, it's remarkable. There are close to 70 authors coming this weekend. It'll be about in 12 venues here in Newburyport. Who is being honored this year? I understand Friday evening, one writer and historian will be honored. Who would that be, and what was she writing about?
Well, Elaine Weiss is the person that we're honoring. This is the first time we've actually gone outside New England, but because women's suffrage is 100 next year, and her book is brand new, and it's about the final hours. It's called The Woman's Hour, and it's the final hours that led up to the ratification, the 36 needed states to ratify the 19th Amendment. And so it's a pretty exciting a book, first of all, an event. She's going to be in conversation with Linda Hirschman, and Linda wrote Sisters-in-Law, which is about Sandra Day O'Connor and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So they're two dynamo women, and I think the opening event is going to be terrific. And then right after that, we have the dinner, and you can just walk over there to the Masonic Lodge. There is a charge for the dinner. It's the only thing that we charge for. It's $50, but so worth it. And you can rub shoulders with every author that's here that goes to the dinner.
Skye, talking about authors, there are a number of Newburyport literary folk in here. Can you talk about a couple, like Andre Dubus the third, for instance, is a real fixture. He's a national name. He's going to be here, and how is he going to be presented here?
Well, he has a new book out, but also he'll also be talking with Peter Orner about the reissuing of his dad's books, Andre Dubus II, and it's so neat because our very first festival, we honored his dad. So it's coming full circle.
And Vicki, another well-known literary celebrity in our town is Rena Espaillat, a poet and just a general good person in Newburyport. Tell us a little about Rena and what she's going to be doing at the festival.
You don't have nearly enough time to hear about Rena. Rena is, well, she's just like something from heaven that dropped into Newburyport. She's as busy as a little bee. I think she's written something like 17 books of poetry, and she's in high demand for speaking everywhere. And she's originally from the Dominican Republic, and so she's involved in poetry events there, but also in Lawrence and Lowell when they have Hispanic poetry, because she writes, of course, in 2 languages, and she translates. So she's translated. I think Richard Wilbur is her latest translation. I know she translated Robert Frost. She's just, well, we could go on forever. Do you want to keep talking about Rena? Because I've got a lot more I can say. She does the Melopillas. She's a hotshot.
Well, Skye, Anne Easter Smith writes history. She writes historical fiction, actually. Talk a little about Anne Easter Smith. She's been here for a number of years.
Yes, and she has a number of books on historical fiction out. She'll be here with Edith Maxwell, who I think will be the moderator, because Edith Maxwell does mystery books.
Yeah, she's
really.
also local.
But she's also local, as is Dyke. You'll be here.
Yeah, Dyke, you're local.
Well, she's...
I wanted to say that James Sullivan, we're happy that he'll be joining us. He's a very well-known journalist who's works for the Boston Globe, and previously with the San Francisco Monitor. Mm-hmm. And he usually writes wonderful things about the festival itself.
Well, I can see why you have such good feelings for him. Oh. Well, you mentioned my name, Dyke Hendrickson. I'm the host. This is Life Along the Merrimack, and I would mention that I am hosting an event which I find to be very interesting. It's called Into the Raging Sea, 33 mariners, 1 megastorm, and the sinking of El Faro. And that's a remarkable story. It's about a container ship that went down several years ago. It went down without a trace. It lost 33 mariners. It went into a storm it should not have. But the author is talking about the Globe. She's currently the editor of the Ideas section at the Globe. Her name is Rachel Slade. She'll be here talking about how she got into it. And one of the remarkable things about the book is after the ship went down, they were able to find the black box. That's on airplanes, of course, but it's also on ships. And they found this black box 15,000 feet under the Atlantic. That's 3 miles. And so she was able to listen to the dialogue of the last hours on the ship. And so I'm expecting a remarkable presentation by her. Another local person, I think, is Bethany Groff DeRoe, who will be speaking. What is she going to be talking about, Skye? Or maybe, Vicki, perhaps you're aware of that.
Well, excuse me. Yeah, she has a new book out that she's been working on for quite some time, and it's Eben Inspires a Newburyport Marin, and Year of Remembrance. This is a soldier who was from Newburyport, I think. Well, anyway, it's a story of a soldier.
A local soldier.
He was a local soldier. Okay, so anyway, so she's going to be talking about that, but I just want to mention that both she and Glee Woodward handle all the local history, and all of that is in the City Hall auditorium. So I think, Dyke, your session on New England Coast Guard stories is there too. So anything that's local history is there. At the Central Congregational Church is all the poetry, and we have some extraordinary poets this year: January O'Neill and Major Jackson, Sidney Lee, and of course Rena, David Ferry, some really remarkable people. Nashin Usuf. Just and then the powwow poets start the day off with breakfast with the poets, so you can go grab a cup of coffee and listen to some really sterling poetry.
Well, as Vicki mentioned, nonfiction is at City Hall in Newburyport, and a couple of
Local
selections,
history.
Local history. One of them is When the Irish Invaded Canada by Christopher Klein. That should be interesting because we know there are a lot of people of Irish heritage here in the area. There's a presentation, Black Flags, Blue Waters, The Epic History of America's Most Notorious Pirates by Eric J. Dolan. New England Coast Guard Stories, Remarkable Mariners. That's my presentation at 10:30. There's one at noon, Sterling Hayden's Wars by Lee Mandel. You might remember Sterling Hayden. He was an actor of many years ago, of World War II era, so he's passed away. But that'll be at noon. And there'll be several more. We talked about Bethany, and there's also one by Sean Moore, Slavery and the Making of the Early American Library. So, Vicki, let me ask you, how do you find these authors, and how are they chosen? You have more than 60 this year. It's a remarkable group of people. How are they chosen?
Well, we have a team of people. We have really 4 people who are pretty much devoted to getting authors. And so some of them are our favorites. So we just do it on a totally subjective, I really love that person's writing, let's get them. That. Then we have Hannah Harlow works for a publisher, Harcourt Mifflin. I think I'm right.
Yes.
And so she brought us Nana Kahim Ajibrinya. And he's a young man. This is his first volume of short stories. He is such a hotshot. He's gotten every kind of award. He's when his book was reviewed, it was on the front page of the New York Times section, and it was reviewed by Tommy Orange, who wrote There, and that's another book that's gotten a lot of praise. Tommy's not coming, but Nana is, and he is just too cool. I've watched a couple of podcasts that he's in, and I can't wait to see him and meet him. And he'll be in discussion with...
what is this book about?
It's short stories. Mm-hmm. And so some of them are fairly angry. Some of them are funny. But they are all engaging.
Skye, who are you looking forward to seeing? One person who's local that I think I'll go to is Anya Greeny, who is from Newburyport. She writes essays, she writes short stories, and she has a presentation called Green Card and Other Essays. Now, she is Irish. I think that refers to the green card. Have you seen her speak, and do you think she'll be an attractive guest?
Yes, she's a wonderful speaker. Her books have a real... individual, you can hear her talking almost. I think she'd be a very good person to go to. She talks about when she was a child in Ireland, and she does it in such a lovely way. And then she comes here, and you see her eyes in America for the first time. So it's very intriguing, lovely, warm, and nice.
And
Vicki, how about yourself? Are you looking forward to a particular area? You usually go with Breakfast with the Poets, do you not?
I always go to Breakfast with the Poets because I want to meet all the poets, even if I can't be at their presentation. The thing that Jen Antwistle, and Jen is the co-chair with me, and an incredibly hard worker, she and I pretty much have to be all over the place. So we try to sneak in and see somebody for a few minutes, but we don't always get to stay for the entire presentation.
Well, one interesting element relates to sports, and the NCAA championships recently finished, and millions of people watched the college basketball playoffs. And one presentation is the book, The Last Temptation of Rick Pitino. The author is Michael Sokoloff, and it's about Rick Pitino. He actually coached the Celtics about 2 decades ago. He went off, he coached Kentucky, came back and coached Louisville. He's been suspended and expelled from the Louisville program because some of his players were taking money. But The Last Temptation of Rick Pitino is an interesting book. It talks about the NCAA, which is a multi-billion-dollar business, as I think everyone knows. And so I'm looking forward to that one. The Woman's Hour, I just want to get back to that a little bit. The great fight to win the vote. And as I recall, you started saying this, Vicki, it came down to one state, the state of Tennessee, and it was very close, and it came down to one vote in the State House of Tennessee. Can you talk about how close that was to get the woman's vote?
Well, there were 3 groups. 2 were suffragists or suffragettes, depending on who you are, and they were sort of competing. One was a more militant group of suffies, and the other was perhaps more benign. But they all wore yellow roses, which we will all be wearing because we would have been suffies had we been there at that time. The antis were against women's suffrage because they didn't want black women to have the right to vote. Why should a field hand get the right to vote? And, of course, talk about cutting off your nose to spite your face is about the stupidest thing I ever heard of. But anyway, never mind all the other issues. And there's been quite a lot surfacing lately about black women's roles in that whole movement. And Sojourner Truth, of course, is one of the leaders of that. And she and Ida B. Wells are also addressed in this book. So it's a fascinating book. As
I understand it, the book has been picked up for a movie. There's some funding, and Hillary Clinton actually is going to be an executive producer of that. And so that's an exciting development, which will probably give it even further legs than that.
Well, who knew? Good for you, Dyke.
Well, one of the authors I'm looking forward to hearing is well-known on local television, Phillippi Ryan. Mm-hmm. She has a book called Trust Me. You must have seen Phillippi Ryan on TV, Skye, or, it seems like she's written 10 books in a short period, 10 books in addition to being on TV. Are there a lot of mystery writers here, as she is?
Well, yes, and of course she's a wonderful mystery writer. Well, we have Edith Maxwell coming, who does a lot of sort of more cozy mysteries. Let's see. Elizabeth, is it Elizabeth Elo? We know her as Elizabeth Brink, but she's coming, and she writes wonderful. I think she used to live right here in Newburyport.
Yeah, she lived here for 17 years, Elizabeth Elo. She's on a panel at 2:30 on Saturday at the Firehouse. It's called Clues and the Clueless. Mystery writers talk about how much can be divulged and when. And Elizabeth Elo will be there, Edwin Hill, who is an editor and a writer, and Phillippi Ryan. And I was going to say about she's an investigative reporter, has written 10 books, and I think that should be, a very interesting presentation.
Well, one thing about Phillippi Ryan is that she started as a self-published author. And we don't allow self-published authors to come unless they are part of local history, just because we don't have a way to vet them all. And, everybody and his uncle has written a book sometime or another, and so we don't let them come. But she now has a publisher. So here she is.
So that's an interesting fact, and there'll be 3 on that panel. We talked a little about Saturday. They're going to be recognizing book clubs at Saturday night at 7, and I just wondered if in a brief way, there are half a dozen book clubs, at least in Newburyport. People buy books, they discuss them. How did it come to pass that you're going to be permitting book clubs to get involved in this?
Well, Bethany Groff Doro, thank you. She is in a book club that's celebrating their 100th anniversary this year. And so as we were...
She's not that old.
No, she's not that old.
Thank you, Skye, for
Yeah,
pointing
I'm
that
so
out.
glad you said that. She didn't start it. No, she didn't. She's young. She's really a young woman, yeah. All right, so we're trying to figure out, because the theme this year is open a book, open your world. And so we're trying to think of ways to celebrate that idea. And we came, I know, PBS had just run that series. You remember that series, Dyke, with Meredith, what's her name?
Vieira.
Vieira. And on your favorite book. And we thought, gee, we should do something with that. And then we came up with the idea of book clubs, and we sent out we sent out sort of a questionnaire to people. A lot of people filled out the questionnaires about their book club, how it got started, what kind of books they like to read, etc. And so there's going to be a panel discussion that evening, and Bethany will be sort of the kingpin of that, and I think it's going to be terrific, great fun.
Well, that was one of the greatest series that PBS did.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But
as people might remember, each week they would have a different discussion. Authors would speak, publishers would speak, and it was a wonderful presentation. Now I'm thinking Huckleberry Finn was right to the end.
But To Kill a Mockingbird won.
Yes.
But I just wanted to get back to one thing. Bethany's uncle, you may have heard of him, Russell Banks, the amazing literati of our lifetime. One of them is coming, thanks to Bethany. And so he's going to be in conversation about the short story and with Steve Yarborough. So that's a really big deal for us to have Russell Banks here.
Another quite famous author that's coming is Joyce Maynard.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, Joyce went to Yale as a young woman, freshman in Yale, and the New York Times picked up on an article she wrote, and then the man from, let's see, who is the...
J.D. Salinger?
J.D. Salinger read the article. He took her away from college. She lived with him. And the wonderful thing about it is that now she's no longer with J.D. Salinger. He's dead.
Yeah, but he dumped her.
But she's back in college this year as a freshman.
Oh, wonderful.
And she's enjoying it. So we'll see her here, and she'll talk about her books.
Well, it's good she's back in college after writing so many books. I remember a comment that Microsoft's Bill Gates made not long ago. He was getting a honorary degree from Harvard, and he came up and he said, I'm thrilled to be honored with a degree here at Harvard. I think since I'm changing vocations, I'm going into philanthropy, I should have a college degree. Now, this is after he had made $100 billion, so that got a pretty good laugh. Vicki, were you going to say
I was just going to say something about Joyce Maynard. When all the Me Too business started, I guess in 2016, she came out because she was so harshly criticized about a book that she wrote about her relationship with J.D. Salinger, and that she was just a young woman trying to take advantage and blah, 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 blah. And so now, of course, everything has gone a complete full circle the other way, and she's, being celebrated for her boldness, and that's all. I mean, it's just a funny change of social mores and considerations.
Well, we've got just a few minutes left. This is Life Along the Merrimack, the weekly show that talks about the history and health of the river and frequently talks about events. The Literary Festival is coming up here in Newburyport this Friday and Saturday. One other book that I think will be interesting is for young adults. This is an area that's, I think, very beneficial, Bringing World War II to Life, Historical Fiction for the Next Generation. And that's with Tara Lynn, Masai, and Kip Wilson. And I think that should be interesting. some of us have read a lot and seen a lot on film about World War II, but this is a chance for younger people. Do you have many people this year for young adults, or does it change from year to year?
Well, this year, for the first year, we're not having much for children. We're not having anything for children, actually, because we had such a few children respond, and we'd have all these authors there, and they'd, be talking to two kids. So we decided to try to work with the schools instead and do that and address children's work that way. But we do have a couple of YA authors, and so I think that we'll just see how that goes. We hope that the schools will encourage their students to come. I've just been hammering away at the Knock, since that's where I am most of the day.
But you famously had the author of children's books who filled the IC.
Jeff Kinney.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Now, Jeff Kinney, is really among the leading authors in the country in terms of books sold. He started here in Newburyport at the Daily News.
Yes, that's right.
He's one of the and sells millions of copies of books.
Cartoonist.
And when he came, it was full. I couldn't even get in. The parents, the children. It was a wonderful day.
Well, but there was nothing in competition. You don't have sports events on Friday night. You don't have parents who want to go and watch other authors speak. It's a different thing when you have it Friday night. If you had children all Friday night, then fine, but we can't do that. So.
We all have good memories of the festival. Can one of us think of a time that, a presentation was really great? I mean, I think of Tess Gerritsen. She is a novelist. She just made a film off of the coast of Maine.
George Mitchell.
And she came several times. And Skye, we've had some public figures here as well. Wasn't George Mitchell here?
Oh, we loved George Mitchell. And I will tell you that I was born in Waterville, Maine, and that's where George is from. And when he spoke, I felt he's of my dad's generation, and there's a certain honesty and a certain, sort of really grabbing your own boots and getting on with life about them, and the way that they became successful in life was just truly remarkable. So it's really great to hear him speak.
Vicki, did you have one that you remember as being? Of course, I suspect that you remember many for being outstanding. But is there one or two you can focus on that you really enjoyed?
One thing that I remember being particularly taken with was Ruth Franklin. She wrote a biography of, wrote the lottery. Who wrote the lottery? Shirley Jackson. Thank you. Thank you so much, Vicki, for having a brain. And so...
Well, we don't read the same books. I'm trying to jump in.
Shirley Jackson and Ruth Franklin wrote this really remarkable biography of her. And Steve Yarborough was the person who was in conversation with her, and he had done a beautiful job of preparing. So that's just one of many, many, many.
Well, sports frequently does well, and one that I liked several years ago was Bill Lee. He had been a pitcher for the Red Sox. He was very funny, very irreverent, and he kept everybody busy. And last year, George Mitchell, I happened to MC that. That was very exciting.
4 years ago.
Any others that I'm just trying to think of them myself? Any that were outstanding? Oh, you know who was very good? I'm blanking on her name, but she wrote a story about George Washington and Martha Washington having a slave.
Yes.
And the slave escaped.
Yes,
and
yes.
It was just so remarkable. It filled the place. It was at City Hall, and that was one of the great things that I saw.
Another terrific one was last year's opening event, Andre and Ann Hood. They were fantastic.
They were great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I've been talking to Skye Wentworth and Vicki Hendrickson of the Literary Festival. I'm Dyke Hendrickson. I'm the host of this show, and we talk about the river, its health, its history, and frequently talk about events, and that's what we did today.
We floated in. Well, on a little iceberg.
So it's been good. It's the 26th and 27th. That's this weekend. It starts Friday night. Every event is free. I must stress that. So please consider coming down. Thank you for listening. You can catch us on YouTube or SoundCloud, and please do that in the future. Thank you again.